This video is going to be talking about how to finance your legal education. This was probably one of the biggest concerns I had about applying to law school and eventually going to law school. I had no idea how I was going to pay for all of this, so I know I'm not the only one out there that feels this way, so I wanted to do a video talking about all the different financial aid options that are out there for law students. So there are three big types of financial aid for law students. That's going to be savings, student loans, and then scholarships. There is a special bonus fourth category that I will get into, but it is not applicable for everybody. So I will talk about it, but it's not one of the big three that are out there for most law students. So the first one is savings. If you're like me, I worked for a year before going to law school. One of the reasons why I decided to do that in the first place was because I did want to be able to get some savings together instead of going straight from undergrad to law school. So this actually helped out quite a bit. It just gives me a nice little cushion. I'm not living like completely off of student loans, and so it doesn't feel like I'm just completely draining out of money, even though I am. It just has like a nice little cushion. I like seeing that there is still money in my bank account instead of just seeing it dwindling down excessively. So having savings has been a nice cushion for that. I usually use my savings to pay for like rent, utilities, things like that. And then I use my loan payments to like take care of like my credit card payments. So that's how I've been using that. Savings is pretty straightforward. Depending on how long you work, you have more savings. A good tip when it comes to saving, especially if you know that you are working to pay for law school, I would try and save at least like 30% of every paycheck you get and put that like as a designation solely for law school. I know sometimes that can be a little hard, depending on like different circumstances. Maybe you just are not in the place that you can give that much of your like bi-weekly, monthly, whatever paycheck. Totally understandable. That's just kind of like the general rule that I tried to follow for that year I was working, and I think it helped out quite a bit. I ended up saving about like $10,000 at the end of the year, which I've been using to pay for like my rent and things like that. So the more you can save, obviously the better it's going to be, but sometimes you're not in that like financial situation to be able to save like 50 to 30%, and if that's the case for you, that's totally fine. Save what you can. So the crux of being able to finance your legal education is unfortunately going to rest on student loans. Tuition for law school is honestly just way too much to not take out loans. Unless you are like really financially like stable or your family is, that's a completely different story. But for most law students, we end up taking about a decent size amount of loans out to pay for just the first year of law school. So for this year, I took out the full amount of direct unsubsidized loans that I can. So that ended up being about like $20,000. And I am using that like solely to like pay for like my credit cards, any like additional like bills and payments that come up. I am fortunate enough that my tuition is completely covered by that like fourth extra option that I was alluding to earlier. So that helps out tremendously, but that's not going to be the case for all my time at UT probably. So at some point I will have to take out more loans. Basically everyone I know in law school takes out loans. I know there's the stigma that you want to take out as little loans as possible, which is true. But the thing about law school and then just college in general is you invest in important things. So, when you buy a house, you get a mortgage, you're investing in that house. When you buy a car, you finance it, you're investing in that car. Same thing with going to college. So taking out loans is the same thing as taking out a mortgage or financing a car. You are working towards paying something off that eventually, maybe not so much for a car because depreciation, but The end goal eventually is that, you know, all of that money is going to pay off because you're going to be in a better situation. So I know taking out loans can be really scary. I don't love it. I don't love seeing the like debt number on my credit score every time I check it, but unfortunately that's just kind of what needs to be done. But I am here to demystify and tell you that it is not as scary as it sounds, and you will be okay. So there are basically two types of loans that you can take out, starting with the like least complex, at least in my opinion. You can take out private loans. So some companies that do that's like Sallie Mae, Common Bond, Earnest. These are going to be private lending companies. These generally require credit score checks, and the interest rates are probably going to be all over the place depending on that credit score check. So it's kind of hard to say what the range is. Sometimes it can be pretty affordable if you have a good credit score. However, if you are, you know, a student fresh out of undergrad, you probably don't have the best credit score. Therefore, the interest rate is probably going to be pretty high. So just as a general rule, I tend to tell people that if government loans are an option, that's probably the one you want to take out, just because private loans are so volatile and so unpredictable that it's like, I can't in good faith say that that's the best route when I know that there is a more stable and predictable route that you can go. And another reason why I don't recommend private loans as like the first option is because repayment starts almost immediately as soon as you take out that loan. So I'll talk about it a little bit in like the government loans option, but basically there is no grace period for that loan. The repayment is going to start immediately and interest will start accruing immediately. And so that is not something that I want for myself, and I wouldn't recommend to other people, just because I can't imagine being in law school and then also stressing about how I'm going to make loan payments at this moment when I have no income. So for that reason, I would say private loans are probably not the first area you want to look. Of course, every person's situation is different. Unfortunately, if you are undocumented or you have DACA, you are not eligible for federal student loans. So unfortunately, these private loans might be the only route that you have. So if that's the case, then, you know, unfortunately, that's the route you have to go. But if you do have other options, I would say that federal student loans might be the route you want to go. Okay, so let's get into federal student loans. So in order to be eligible for federal student loans, you have to complete the FAFSA. That is going to require a copy of your tax return for the year previous. Depending on when you are submitting it, it might be 2 years previous. So if you're watching this in 2021 and you're going to be doing the FAFSA for fall 2022, you will need your 2020 tax return. If someone is watching this in a few years, kind of do the math that I just did. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can always check the federal student aid website, studentaid.gov. They usually like immediately have put like what tax return you need. So if you ever have any questions, you can just go to that website. And so if you did not file a tax return for that previous year, that is no big deal. You will just put down that you did not file. The area that gets a lot of people riled up is some schools will require for you to put in your parental tax information. So if your parents filed taxes that year, sometimes your school may require you to disclose that information on the FAFSA. I don't really think it has too big of an impact. I put my parents' tax information on my FAFSA and I still ended up with the same amount of student loans that everybody else was offered. So I think at the end of the day, it doesn't have too big an effect, but I do know it gives people a little pause because they're like, I've been independent these last 5 years, I've put myself through undergrad, I'm gonna be putting myself through law school, why do I have to put my parents' tax information? I don't know. That's kind of just what some schools want. And then unfortunately, you know, in order to be considered for internal institutional scholarships, most schools require the FAFSA anyways, so if you don't put that down, then you might not be able to get a school scholarship. So I always just say, if you can, do it. If you for some reason just cannot get your parents' tax information, for whatever reason that is, reach out to the school's financial aid office to see if there's anything that they can do regarding that. As I alluded to earlier, unfortunately, federal student loans are only eligible for U.S. citizens and permanent residents. If you are undocumented or a DACA recipient and you attempt to fill out the FAFSA, it will have errors just because you do not have a social, and or if you do have a social, it's still not going to clear through on their system. So like I said, if you fall under that category, then the best route might be private loans. But if you are a U.S. citizen and or permanent resident, you are eligible to fill out the FAFSA. Another big difference that gets a lot of people, especially people who got a lot of federal student aid as an undergrad, is that there are no Pell Grants for graduate programs, so you will only be offered student loans. I've known a lot of people and I've worked with a lot of students who had previously gotten Pell Grants during undergrad, and then as they were wanting to go back and get a graduate type of degree, that they learned that they were no longer eligible for Pell Grants. Unfortunately, the government just doesn't give Pell Grants for graduate programs. You could go back and get another bachelor's and get more Pell Grant money, but unfortunately there is no Pell Grant money for graduate programs, so you will only be offered student loans. So by completing the FAFSA, you are eligible for two different types of loans. So the first one is going to be the federal direct unsubsidized loan, and the second one is going to be a Grad Plus loan. So I'll kind of break those two down a little bit more. So for direct unsubsidized loan, like I mentioned, the full amount is about $20,000. I think specifically it's $2,500, but I may be off a little bit on that second number. And these usually start at an interest rate about like 5.28%. That tends to kind of change throughout the year, but not drastically. You can usually count on it being around 5% for interest rates. And so any student who completes the FAFSA is automatically going to be eligible for that loan. It's important to remember that this is unsubsidized, so if you ever got a subsidized loan in undergrad, that basically meant that while you were in school, the government was going to be paying the interest that accrues. Since this is unsubsidized, the government will not be paying that interest. So that doesn't mean anything too drastic for you right now. That just means that when you eventually do leave law school, either graduating or otherwise, when you see that principal, you will also be seeing the interest that accrued during your time at school. So the second type is going to be that Grad Plus loan. This is used to supplement the direct student loan. So kind of a way to think about it is whatever the remaining balance of tuition is after you've applied your direct loan, that is the amount of Grad Plus loan you can take out. So it's different for everybody. It's kind of just depending on, your school's tuition, how much of that loan you took out, and then what amount of that Grad Plus loan you want to take out. But it's tuition minus the direct loan, and then that's the amount of Grad Plus loan you can take out. You can take out the full amount, you can take out half. It's completely up to you, but that is the full amount of loans that you are able to take out. The Grad Plus loan does have its own separate application, so you do still need to fill out the FAFSA, but in order to get that Grad Plus loan, it has its own separate application as well as the FAFSA, and that's also going to require a credit score check. I'm not sure what the criteria is on that credit score, but I do know that it's at least pretty reasonable, because most people end up having to dip into that Grad Plus loan anyways to completely cover school. So it's probably not something too terribly high, and that interest rate usually comes out to about 6%. Last time I checked, it was 6.28. I personally did not take out any Grad Plus loans, but that is because I fall under a certain category, again, that mystery category that I have not disclosed yet. But so I did not need to take out a Grad Plus loan. However, In the future, I probably might. So it's always important to keep that option available. If you don't take it out one year, that doesn't preclude you from being able to take it out the following years. So that's always still an option, but just keep it in mind that, of course, it is more debt. For scholarships, there are two main types of scholarships. There are institutional scholarships that your school offers. They usually have their own separate scholarship portal that you log in, you submit application, you upload any documents they ask, and then that application goes straight to the school's financial aid office so they can determine scholarships, what your need-based, merit-based, things like that. That's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty streamlined process between you and the school. You just need to make sure that you submit the FAFSA so that way they can get a holistic view of all the information in order to make those choices. And then there are third-party scholarships. So these are going to be separate applications put out by different organizations. Different law firms have different scholarships out there, so it's just a matter of doing investigation. I know that the Law School Admissions Council has a pretty good website that regularly updates for scholarships out there for law students that are third party, so I really recommend checking out that resource. I ended up checking it out a little too late in the game, so I would say probably start checking it out winter, early spring. A lot of applications are going to be closing around that time, so that's probably the latest you want to be checking it out. It probably doesn't hurt to be checking in the fall anyways. Each scholarship is probably going to have its own separate application, and they're all probably going to have their own different criteria, so it's important to read through the descriptions and make sure that this is a scholarship that is applicable to you, and that you are not so outside the criteria that it might not be the best use of your time. Okay, and the last and fourth way to finance your legal education, the one that is not applicable to everybody, but if it's applicable to you, it could be super helpful, veteran benefits. So my dad was in the Air Force. He had a lot of leftover Hazelwood hours, which is a type of veteran benefit specifically for people who served in Texas. Unfortunately, I don't know if other states out there have truly similar programs. I imagine they do, but unfortunately I just don't have that readily knowledgeable. But I definitely recommend researching. If you are a veteran or a dependent of a veteran, it is totally worth looking into your local VA to see what kind of benefits are available for you and your education. So because my dad has Hazelwood hours, he is able to transfer those to me as his dependent. So my dad's Hazelwood completely covers my tuition for this year. I am able to get my scholarship back as a reimbursement check from the school, and all of my student loans go directly to me so I can use them as I see fit. So I highly recommend looking into your local Veteran Affairs office and seeing what benefits might be available for you. Alright y'all, but that's basically it. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I have a lot more vlogs coming up soon, as well as additional resource videos like this one, so stick around.